Welcome to Big Rock Moto. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I only have two quick favors. One, please subscribe if you're not already. And two, there'll be a link here and down below where you can bookmark my affiliate links and use them whenever you're shopping for parts and gear. Helps keep stuff like this going, and I really appreciate that. Welcome to the 2026 Big Rock Moto Budget Adventure Motorcycle Shootout. Here beside me right now are just 4 of the total 6 bikes that are in the shootout. So I've got the Kawasaki KLE500, the Honda NX500, the Kawasaki KLR650, the KTM 390 Adventure R. Now, not pictured right here in this shot are the 2 other bikes in the comparison, the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450 and the CFMOTO Ibex 450 or the 450 MT. Those 2 bikes are in the comparison, but for logistical reasons, due to the challenge of trying to get all the bikes here overlapping on a single day was very difficult. But don't worry, those 2 bikes are in this comparison. All 6 motorcycles in this shootout share the following things in common. They all cost between $6,000 to $8,000 US. They all make between 40 and 50 horsepower, meaning that they're capable of true highway travel, of cruising down the highway at 80 miles an hour or 130 kilometers an hour. And importantly, all the bikes in this test are A2 license compatible for people in Europe, except for, of course, this KLR 650, which is not even sold in Europe. So here's how this video is going to go. For each of these 6 bikes, I'll briefly cover the specs and the features. I'll do a drop test. I'll also show you the seating position and the ergonomics, and then we'll ride all the bikes on my test loop. To make this comparison as fair, as objective, and as scientific as possible, I put all 6 bikes on the exact same test loop. Now, this test loop consists of 2-lane highway, 4-lane freeway. It also has 2-track off-road trails and also a sand wash and then crossing over obstacles. I chose not to subject any of these 6 bikes to extreme off-road conditions. The reason for that is most people buying a motorcycle in this category are not going to do extreme off-roading. And I really wanted to focus this test on how they are in the real world for the way that actual riders are going to actually use them. Once we're done testing all the bikes, we'll come back here. You may see me standing next to different bikes due to how the timing of all this works. Then we'll rank the bikes in the areas of on-road performance, off-road performance, comfort, and we'll also rank them in terms of livability and practicality. We're also going to discuss key feature differences between the bikes and also how these bikes will compare in terms of maintenance and livability when you're talking about maintenance and cost, service intervals, and things like that. This is the most ambitious bike shootout video I've ever taken on here at Big Rock Moto, so stay tuned, lunch up in, and get started. A huge thank you to Law Tigers and their nationwide network of motorcycle attorneys for sponsoring today's video. If you've been the unfortunate victim of a motorcycle accident, I highly recommend you contact Law Tigers. And the reason I say that is, sadly, insurance companies are not on your side and they're going to try to settle with you for the absolute bare minimum amount. Hiring Law Tigers and their nationwide network of attorneys can potentially get you covered for lost wages, pain and suffering, motorcycle accessories, and a whole lot more. Plus, the cool thing about hiring them is there's absolutely zero upfront cost and they only get paid if you do. So if you have been in a motorcycle accident or maybe you know somebody who has, please reach out to Law Tigers and their nationwide network of attorneys. Their contact information will be below, and thanks again to Law Tigers for sponsoring today's video. The KTM 390 Adventure R. Make no mistake about it, this is the most off-road capable, lightest weight bike in this test and it has the most ground clearance. So let's get into this bike. This bike costs $7,699 US base price. Now, if you add things like the quick shifter, the available cruise control from the factory, which by the way, this is the only bike in the test you can get either of those things as factory options. If you add those things, your price is going to start to go up, but I think it's amazing that you can even get something like that on a bike in this category. This bike is the lightest in the class. It weighs 388 pounds or 176 kilos. Seat height is very reasonable when you look at the ground clearance and the suspension travel, 34.3 inches or 870 millimeters. It rides on an 18-inch rear tire instead of the 17-inch we see on a lot of the bikes, and a 21-inch front. Now they're spoked and they do have tubes in them because it's more of a dirt bike style setup, so you're going to have those tubes. Ground clearance on this bike is a massive 10.7 inches or 272 millimeters. To give you some perspective on that KLE500 over there, and that KLR actually, this bike has over 3.5 inches more ground clearance than those bikes. That's just incredible and shows you the difference in the design. The fuel tank on this bike is 3.7 gallons or 14 liters. I measured 63 miles a gallon or 3.7 liters per 100 kilometers. So your theoretical fuel range, if you were to use all the fuel, would be 233 miles or 375 kilometers. This bike uses a 398cc liquid-cooled 4-stroke engine. It puts out 44 horsepower and 29 foot-pounds or 39 newton-meters of torque. Although this engine is the smallest displacement in this group test, it does make a respectable amount of power, although you are down a little bit on torque, and this bike does need a lot of revs to get up to speed, and you'll see that in the test. You've got a slip assist clutch, and you've got a 6-speed transmission with an available quick shifter. Front suspension is WP Apex. It's a 43 millimeter, and you've got 9.1 inches or 230 millimeters of travel, which is the most in the test. And you do have adjustments up here on the top for both rebound and compression damping. Rear suspension on this bike is a WP Apex. You've got adjustable preload and rebound damping, and you have 9.1 inches or 230 millimeters of travel. The front brake on this bike, by the way, do you notice the front brake is on the right side of this bike? I think it's the only bike that has that. Most bikes usually have it on the left side. Just thought that was interesting. But you've got Vibre, which is Brembo's Indian subsidiary. You've got a single 320 millimeter front disc, which is large for the test, and a dual piston caliper. Our rear brake is a 240 millimeter disc with one piston. ABS on this bike is fully configurable. You can have it on, you can have it in off-road mode with the front left on and the rear turned off, which is great. And it does remember the setting when you power cycle the bike, which is one of the only bikes to do that. Traction control, this bike does have it. It's got on-road setting, it's got an off-road setting, or you can turn it off. So it has the most options. The 390 has all LED lighting, and it's got this new kind of signature KTM front end, which I actually kind of like. I know it's kind of futuristic looking, but I'm a fan of it. It comes with a pretty tall windshield here with this vent in here to reduce the back pressure and the buffeting. Handguards are plastic. They're not too bad. They give you a little bit of protection if you make sure the mounts are tightened up, but you'd probably want to replace those if you're going to be doing a lot of off-roading with this bike. You do get a skid plate that provides decent protection, decent amount, but if you're going to be aggressive, you're going to want to upgrade that. The foot pegs are a decent size and they have really nice grippy material for off-road riding. This bike has a unique exhaust setup with the exhaust coming out under here. I am a huge fan of this. It lowers the weight of the bike because you have less exhaust. It keeps the exhaust out of the way of any luggage, just tucked up in here. I think this is a great design. And no, it's not an issue with riding through deep water. People have already proven that. The passenger peg hangers on this bike are pretty big. You can remove them if you want to. It does have a single piece seat, which I did not find to be all that comfortable. You don't get any sort of rear grab handles or cargo rack. That's one way they save money and reduce the weight of the bike, although you're probably going to want to add that if you're going to use this as an adventure bike. Controls on this bike are nice, big, easy to use. They're also backlit, and this switch cluster will be a little different if you get the optional cruise control. You can control all your menu functions through here, and then you've got big buttons over here for stop, start, and all that kind of stuff. Your TFT is a nice big unit. It's bright, contrasty. You can change black or white or have automatic settings if you want. And then I'm not going to go through this whole thing right now, but you've got ride modes. You've configured the ride modes, which it saves that. You can see all your information in here. You can control music and phone and do some navigation through here. You can set up favorites, which is the information here at the bottom of the screen. You can select quick select buttons, which are up and down to select different functions. This is my favorite control setup of the test because it's so configurable and it makes the different ride modes and information easy to use. And I like how you can customize everything on here. The Royal Enfield Himalayan 450, if you have experience with the previous Himalayan, the 411, do not use that to judge this bike. This bike is so much more modern, so much nicer to ride in every single way, and really it's a fully modern motorcycle. All right, so MSRP on this is $5,999, except if you choose one of the tubeless wheel color options, so you can get certain colors with the tubeless wheels, which this test bike does have, and that'll run you $400 more, $63.99 US. In my opinion, that's more than worth it for the convenience of the puncture repair of the tubeless wheels. It weighs 432 pounds or 195 kilos. The seat height is adjustable. It's one of the, I think is the only bike in a test that has an easily adjustable seat height, which I love. Its standard is 32.5 inches or 825 mil, but you can bring it up to 33.2 inches or 845 millimeter if you want some more legroom. It rides on a 21-inch front spoked wheel and a 17-inch rear wheel, but again, my bike does have the tubeless option, which I highly recommend that you consider getting that. Ground clearance is fairly generous on this bike at 9 inches or 230 millimeters. Fuel capacity, 4.5 gallons or 17 liters. On my test loop, I measured 62 miles a gallon or 3.8 liters per 100 kilometer. That gives you a theoretical fuel range of 279 miles or 450 kilometers. The engine on this bike is a 452cc liquid-cooled 4-stroke double overhead cam single cylinder engine. It makes 40 horsepower and 30 foot-pounds or 40 newton meters of torque. That's hooked to a 6-speed transmission with a slip assist clutch. Front suspension are 43 millimeter Showa forks and 7.9 inches or 200 millimeters of travel, and they're non-adjustable. Rear suspension is also by Showa, 7.9 inches or 200 millimeters of travel, and you have an easy adjust preload with this sort of collar setup there that you can adjust with a tool pretty easily. So I liked seeing that's like a stepped adjuster, so nice and easy to use. Brakes on the Himalayan are from Bibre, or Brembo's Indian subsidiary, and you have a 320 millimeter single front disc and a 2-piston caliper. I would have liked to seen stronger brakes on this bike. You'll see that in the performance testing and the riding. I think a 4-piston caliper would have made a big improvement. And then the rear brake is a 270 mil with a single piston caliper. ABS on the Himalayan is switchable to the rear wheel, and it's very easy to do that, and there is no traction control. Lighting on the Himalayan is all LED. You can see the indicators flashing there. It does have 4-way flashers. The rear lighting, some people have criticized it because it doesn't have a dedicated brake light in the middle. It's got these, it uses the indicators for the brake light. The Himalayan uses kind of a dual fender arrangement or dual mudguard. It's got the lower mudguard there, and then it's got the upper one. You can have mud clearance issues. In fact, when we rode these in Utah, we had major clearance issues with mud in that low front fender, but that's the case with a lot of adventure bikes, so it's an aftermarket upgrade that you might be looking to do if you ride on a lot of mud or rocks. You've got a non-adjustable windshield. It comes with a pretty short windshield standard. I really love the crash bars that it comes with. These are phenomenal to have, like this built-in crash protection. Plus, it's a great place. It even has little tie-down loops to mount some luggage bags there if that's something you want to do. The skid plate on Himalayan is part metal and part plastic, and it's actually pretty decently strong in talking to the engineers or Enfield, but I would look at getting a stronger skid plate if I was going to, ride this bike as my own bike. Pretty big brake lever there, which is nice to give you a really big lever, easy to reach with your boot. I have the rubbers taken out of the foot pegs, but it does come with rubbers for vibration isolation. Also, you can kind of see here, there's a vibration isolation on the foot pegs of this bike where the foot pegs mount. It also has that in the handlebars to help control that vibration. Passenger pegs, the hangers for the passenger peg is welded onto the frame. I would have liked to seen a bolt-on arrangement. However, on a positive note, I love the slim, lightweight design of this exhaust. It's really out of the way for luggage, just tucked in very nicely. Really good job with that. This is the only bike in the test that comes standard with the center stand, which is awesome when you have to do chain maintenance, lubrication, cleaning, or fix a tire puncture. It also comes standard with the rear grab handles and the small rear cargo rack, but at least it's nice to have something because some of the bikes in the test don't give you any rear rack at all. Of course, we have a chain final drive, and on this side, it's a little bit easier to see this sort of mechanism here that helps isolate the foot pegs from the vibration, but there's still quite a bit of high frequency vibration that comes through. Mirrors are pretty standard affair here, no fancy pivoting or anything. Control levers are non-adjustable. I would have liked to have some adjustment because it was a little bit too far out for my hands. Would be nice to have an adjustable lever. That's an upgrade that I would look at doing if I was to get this bike for myself. The switchgear works fairly well. It's pretty easy to use, kind of the signature Royal Enfield style with this kind of switch. However, this four-way joystick for the TFT dash, it doesn't have great feel, and a lot of times you end up pushing it the wrong way or trying to kind of having some confusion using that. Sometimes it can be somewhat difficult. You've also got a home button up here. You've got this mode button here which switches between performance and eco riding mode. It also is used to switch your rear wheel ABS off and on. You've got a USB-C port right here, which is great that they thought to include a USB port because some of the bikes don't have that. And then our TFT dash is this circular dash, which I really enjoy. It looks great. You can switch between different modes and different themes of dark or the black, and then you can also pull up trip computers and mile per gallon readouts and things like that, and then you can go in here to the settings and change your appearance and different settings within the bike. This also has Royal Enfield's Tripper navigation system. So if you connect it up to your phone, the application does have to be running on your phone, but then you can have maps come up here on the screen, which is a very nice feature to have. On the dash itself, you've got a large circular tachometer. You've got a fuel gauge here in the middle, gear indicator, speedometer. You can set what you want this line to be here. I have it set to the odometer. The spike's barely broken in. Some different indicators here, and then more trip information here at the bottom. Pretty basic and easy to use, and it's all easy to read. The CFMOTO Ibex 450, or 450 MT, depending on what country you live in, one of the most popular bikes in this category, and for very good reason. The MSRP on this bike is $6,499 US. It has a curb weight fully fueled up of 432 pounds or 195 kilograms. It's got a really low and new rider friendly or short rider friendly seat height, 32.3 inches or 820 millimeters. The wheel set on this bike, one of the things that makes it so great is not only does it have a more off-road friendly 18-inch rear wheel and of course the 21-inch front wheel, but it comes standard with tubeless spoked rims, which is music to the ears of many adventure riders because puncture repair is so much easier. It's got a pretty decent amount of ground clearance at 8.7 inches or 220 millimeters. Not class leading, but definitely more than some of the entrants in the category. I'm looking at you, KLE500. Fuel capacity is 4.6 gallons or 17.5 liters. I measured 57 miles a gallon or 4.1 liters per 100 kilometers on my test loop, giving this bike a theoretical fuel range of 262 miles or 420 kilometers. The engine on the 450 MT, or the Ibex 450, is a 449cc liquid-cooled 4-stroke parallel twin. Uniquely in a group, it has a 270-degree crankshaft. That gives it a unique feel and, most importantly, a unique sound that, in my opinion, is far superior to all the other bikes in terms of the engine sound. It makes 44 horsepower and 32 foot-pounds or 43 newton-meters of torque. That's hooked through a 6-speed transmission with a slipper clutch. Front suspension is 43 millimeter fork KYB inverted fork. It's 7.9 inches or 200 millimeters of travel, and it's fully adjustable. You've got compression, rebound, and fork preload. I really like to see that. Our rear suspension is also KYB, same travel, 7.9 or 200, and you've got a preload adjustment with a collar. It doesn't have a hand adjuster. And it does have a rebound adjuster at the bottom, but there is no separate compression adjuster. Front brake is a single 320 millimeter disc with J1 caliper. It's a 4-piston caliper. Rear brake is a single 240 mil disc with a single piston caliper. Now, you have ABS, obviously, and importantly, it is switchable to the rear, and you leave the front on. When you go to off-road mode, it turns off the rear ABS, leaves the front on, which is the preferred setting for most adventure riding scenarios off-road. And then that also turns off, when you go into off-road mode, that also turns off at the same time the included traction control. So good set of easy-to-use electronics on this bike. Lighting on the Ibex is all LED. You can see this unique stacked headlight design and the LED indicators. Rear lighting, you've got this pretty big central rear tail light, and you've got LED indicators in the back as well. The bike, as you can see, does have four-way flashers, which I always appreciate having that feature. The Ibex comes with CST branded tires, and they do an okay job for sort of a 50-50 adventure tire, but I'd probably upgrade to something better if it was my own bike. It comes with this low front fender. However, CFMOTO does offer, as an OEM accessory, a high dirt bike style front mud guard, which would be good for clearance for rocks and mud, and is something, again, that I would fit if it was my own motorcycle. We see our typical kind of plastic handguards, pretty flimsy. They're not really gonna do much in terms of protecting your levers or anything like that, but they do provide protection from the wind. The factory skid plate is rather thin, just like most factory skid plates are. It has a decent amount of coverage, but the bottom of the engine is quite vulnerable on this bike to impact from rocks. The oil pan really hangs down pretty low, so an upgraded skid plate would be a very important thing to have. I like how the brake lever tip is folding. I do wish it was a little bit larger, but it is folding, and you've got adjustments there. The foot pegs are nice and large for a stock motorcycle. I'm really happy with that. They work quite well. Many riders choose to fit a taller rally style bench seat. This is the standard seat, which gives you that lower seat height. Good grab handles and a nice rear cargo rack, all included from the factory with tie-down points. Really love to have that. Passenger pegs are bolt-on to the subframe, and you have a bolt-on two-piece frame as well. You can see that there. It also bolts on our exhaust, which is right here. Chain drive, of course, as you expect. You can see the collar there to adjust the preload on your rear shock. You've got the shift linkage here for your shifter, and you can adjust this for the height pretty easily. This bike probably has the best factory mirrors in the test. What I like is they're a pivoting mirror, so it's kind of hard to do one-handed, but you can see how they pivot in like this. So if you're off-road or you're transporting a bike, whatever, you can fold those in. That's nice. I still would prefer a dual pivoting mirror, and if this was my motorcycle, of course, I would fit double take mirrors, of course, to have a double pivot setup, which, because you could still break this and potentially break your control mounts here if you took an impact in the wrong way. But these mirrors for factory mirror are excellent, so credit to CFMOTO for that. One interesting thing about this bike is with the handlebars in a neutral position based on the indicators, the bars tend to sweep back pretty far. I'm used to seeing handlebars that are more in line with the fork in terms of their bend here. These sweep fairly far back. If you're riding off-road, there are some marks here. You can rotate them forward depending on your preferences and then adjust your controls accordingly. The switchgear is easy to use and legible on this bike in terms of using the four-way sort of controls. Really easy to use ABS traction control switch, four-way indicators, great, easy to use switchgear. And then our TFT dash is really very nicely done. So you've got speedometer, you've got also two different layouts you can choose from here. You've got indicator lights along the side going back to the tachometer, speedometer. Then you've got here a couple different options. You've got trip computer, odometer here on the top, and then you've got trip time, average mile per gallon, which is not accurate based on my testing, average speed, fuel range, which is also not accurate based on my testing, voltage, and instantaneous miles a gallon. And you've got a coolant temperature and a fuel gauge, which seems to be fairly accurate. So overall, the TFT is great. Now, if you go in here, you can change your settings. You also have phone connectivity, which is really nice to have. Also, again, to point out, I love this adjustable windshield. I wish all motorcycles would have this, and you have a GPS bar to mount your phone or a navigation device. You also have a USB port right here, which is super handy. The Kawasaki KLE500, one of the newest entrants in the category, having just arrived here into the United States. This SE model retails for $7,499 US. However, you can also get a base model bike that comes in $900 less at $6,599. So what do you get if you upgrade to the SE model? You get this green frame, you get this really cool white bodywork, you get a larger TFT dash, which I'll show here in a minute, you get a larger aluminum skid plate, you get metal reinforced handguards, and you get a taller windshield. Is the SE worth it? I think so. My vote is get the SE. I think it's worth the money. This motorcycle weighs 428 pounds or 194 kilograms. The seat height on this bike is 34.3 inches or 870 millimeters. It rides on a 21-inch front and a 17-inch wheel, tube type spoked wheels. However, it's not tubeless like some people were hoping, and it has IRC dual purpose tires. Ground clearance, we'll talk about this in depth in the ride portion, is a measly 7.3 inches or 185 millimeters. That's one of the major downsides of this bike. It's very low slung for a bike that's supposed to go off-road. If you consider it's a tall seat height and a low ground clearance, that's not really a good combination to have. Fuel capacity on this bike is 4.2 gallons or 16 liters. I measured 59 miles a gallon riding this bike, so theoretical fuel range is 248 miles or 399 kilometers if you were to use every last drop of fuel. The engine is a 451cc liquid-cooled 4-stroke parallel twin double overhead cam. It makes 51 horsepower and 32 foot-pounds or 43 newton-meters of torque. However, if you live in a country with A2 licensing restrictions, and this is sold as an A2 licensed bike, the power will be reduced to I think around 45 horsepower because 51 is slightly over the limit for A2 licensing. But here in the US, we get the benefit of the full 51 horsepower, making it the most powerful bike in this test. Clutch is a slip assist clutch, and it's hooked into a 6-speed transmission, unlike the old school KLR back there with the 5-speed transmission. Front fork is a 43 millimeter KYB inverted fork. You've got 8.3 inches or 210 millimeters of travel, and there's no adjustments. The rear shock on this bike is a unitrack, as Kawasaki likes to call it. You do have an adjustment for preload, and you've got 7.9 inches or 200 millimeters of travel. Front brakes on this bike are single 300 millimeter disc with a dual piston Nissin caliper. Rear brake is a 240 millimeter disc, and you get a dual piston Nissin caliper. This bike has an ABS system that you can switch off to both wheels, and traction control, it does not have traction control. This motorcycle has a tall, skinny, rally-style look to it. I like it, but let me know what you think. You've got LED lighting, the headlights, and the turn signals. This windshield here is adjustable in 3 different positions, which is great. I've got it in the middle position right now. Metal reinforced handguards, which are pretty decent, pretty good amount of protection for a factory motorcycle, factory accessory, come on the SE model, and I like them. They're nice. Gotta love this green paint job on this frame on this SE. I think it's worth it just to get that. You really got to get that. Foot pegs are decently sized metal off-road foot pegs with these big feelers. Exhaust is rather low slung, which I think will be good for mounting luggage. It'll be nice and out of the way of luggage. You've got this 2-piece seat here. I'll talk about comfort later on. Controls on the KLE are pretty basic. You don't have any adjustments for your lever reach. You've got an ABS switch, which is great. You can press it twice and then you'll turn off the ABS system. However, you can only turn it off to both wheels. You can't leave it on the front if you wanted to. You do have hazard lights, which is nice. Got this nice 1/1/8 handlebar, which is a nice upgrade from the old KLR with that smaller handlebar. Pretty tall riser that they come on here. I like the silver finish to it. It looks really nice. One note, these are not the stock mirrors. I'm testing this bike more thoroughly because I'm doing an in-depth review, so I've got double take mirrors on this bike, which you should check out. You've got a GPS mount up here, which I love having that. And then the SE model's got this really beautiful, bright, contrasty, it's hard to see on the camera, TFT screen as opposed to the LCD you get on a standard bike. You've got trip computers in here, you've got some miles per gallon readouts, you've got an odometer, pretty basic, but you've got average speed, time, battery voltage. You've got some nice readouts. Definitely an upgrade from what you see on like the KLR and maybe even some of the other bikes. Really like this dash. It works really well. Gear indicator, fuel gauge, tachometer. Yeah, it's a nice dashboard. The venerable, the legendary KLR 650 that's been around forever, but it was updated in 2022 with fuel injection and new bodywork and a few other small updates. But the basic design, the frame and engine of this bike have been around since almost when I was born in 1987. I was actually born in 1984. This motorcycle is the S model. They make this in the S version, which is for shorter riders. I'll talk about how that differs from the normal KLR. They also make like an adventure version, which has added accessories. MSRP of this bike is $6,899. This bike weighs 456 pounds or 207 kilograms, the heaviest bike in the test. The seat height on this shortened S model, because the seat has been sculpted out and the suspension travel is less, is a low 32.1 inches or 815 millimeters. The standard bike is 34.3 inches or 870 millimeters. This bike rides on 21-inch front and 17-inch wheels, spoked. They do have tubes in them, and it comes with Dunlop tires. Ground clearance on this bike is a bit limited, 7.3 inches or 185 millimeters. If you get the regular bike, it goes up an inch to 8.3 or 210 millimeters. This bike has a huge fuel tank, that's why people like it, 6.1 gallons or 23 liters of fuel. I measured, however, a very low fuel economy compared to the other bikes in the test of 51 miles a gallon or 4.6 liters per 100 kilometer. So your theoretical riding range, if you use every ounce of fuel, would be 311 miles or 500 kilometers. This bike is powered by a 652cc liquid-cooled 4-stroke double overhead cam single-cylinder engine. It makes 40 horsepower, but it makes the most torque in the group at 39 foot-pounds or 53 Newton meters. It's got a regular style clutch, no slip assist, and it's hooked into a very old school 5-speed transmission. It's the only bike in the test that does not have a 6-speed transmission. Front suspension is a 41 millimeter fork, pretty small diameter there, 6.7 inches or 170 millimeters of travel, but if you get the regular KLR, that goes up to 7.9 inches or 200 millimeters. Rear suspension is unitrack shock. It's got adjustable preload. It's got 7 inches or 180 millimeters of travel. If you get the regular bike, that goes up almost an inch to 7.9 or 200 millimeters. Front brake is a single 300 millimeter disc with a dual piston caliper. Rear brake is a single 240 millimeter disc with a dual piston caliper. This bike does not have ABS. However, you can buy KLR 650s that do have ABS. That's what I would highly recommend for safety. Also, if you get the ABS model, it will not have any ability to turn it off, but it is an off-road tuned ABS system, and it works very, very well. That's the one I would recommend that you get. Traction control does not exist. You cannot get traction control on a KLR 650. The KLR gets by with a basic LCD dashboard. It does have a fuel gauge and a clock, some trip computers, and a speedometer. It doesn't have any tachometer. It's got a GPS bar, which is great. You've got a windshield you can adjust in 2 different positions, and it works quite well. I like the design of it. Pretty big fairing area where you could mount accessories and things like that if you wanted to. Mirrors are pretty basic. You've got these hand guards that are really protective from the wind, but they don't do anything to protect the handlebars or the levers, but they are great for protecting your hands on a cold day. You can see the handlebar is the old school, like 7/8 inch smaller bar, so not super strong. This is what you saw back in the 80s and 90s on bikes. Modern bikes have really gotten away from that. You don't have any adjustments on your levers, so that's really basic. The controls are just basic and easy to use. We do have LED lighting, but we do have regular incandescent turn signals. KLRs come equipped with these Dunlop K750 tires. You get a basic plastic skid plate. If you're going to go off-road, you need to upgrade that right away because it is really vulnerable to damage, especially with the engine oil drain plug hanging down. Foot pegs are rubber mounted, and they're really not good for off-road because they flex a lot, and also you need to get more of a metal foot peg on here to have some grip when you ride off-road. They do give you this generously sized cargo rack with a locking tool compartment. However, I would like to see more tie-down points integrated. There's not many tie-down points, it's just sort of a flat piece of metal, but it is useful to have as some bikes don't come with any sort of cargo rack. The Honda NX500. They used to call this the CB500X, and I can remember way back in the day when this used to have a 17-inch front wheel. All right, so this bike costs $6,899 base price. Now, you may look at this bike and think, well, it doesn't quite look like an adventure bike. You see the cast wheels and it's kind of low slung, but let's be honest, most adventure bike buyers don't ever really take their bikes off-road, and if they do, it might just be a gravel road. And if that's the case, this NX is absolutely perfect for that. So this bike weighs 432 pounds or 195 kilograms. Seat height is very reasonable, 32.8 inches or 833 millimeters. Like I said before, it does run on cast wheels. It's the only bike in a group that does that. And it uses a smaller 19-inch front wheel, which yes, does sacrifice a little bit of off-road ability, but it makes it a better handling road bike. Ground clearance on this bike, surprisingly, is about the same as on the KLE500. It's 7.1 inches or 180 millimeters. Fuel capacity is 4.7 gallons or 18 liters, and I measured an astonishing 67 miles a gallon or 3.5 liters per 100 kilometer on this bike, meaning you have a range, if you were to use all the fuel, of 314 miles or 505 kilometers, which is just phenomenal. It uses a 471cc liquid-cooled 4-stroke parallel twin engine. It's actually the largest displacement in the group test, I believe. It puts out 47 horsepower right at that A2 limit, 32 foot-pounds of torque or 43 Newton meters. It's got a slipper clutch and a 6-speed transmission. Front suspension is by Showa. It's a 41 millimeter diameter. It's got 5.9 inches or 149 millimeters of travel, which is the least amount in the test, which makes sense. And it's got no adjustments. Rear suspension on this bike is also Showa. It's 5.3 inches or 135 millimeters of travel, and it is adjustable on 5 positions for preload. This is one of the only bikes, or one of the few bikes in the test that uses a dual front disc setup. So you've got two 296 millimeter discs with twin piston Nissan calipers. Now, this extra braking power is very important if you're considering riding with luggage and a passenger, because that's a real safety issue. So I do like the extra braking power on this bike, and it's very noticeable. And on the back, you have a single 240 millimeter disc with 1 piston. You know, it's so boring talking about rear disc brakes. I almost think about taking it out of these walkarounds, but you know, then somebody would ask about it. Now, this bike does come with ABS, but there's no way to turn it off, although I found it works surprisingly well in the dirt. You'd be surprised how well it works. And then it does have traction control, and there is a button, a dedicated button here on the switchgear where you can turn off traction control, which is great. The NX has all LED lighting for this model year, which is great to see. You've got a windshield. I wish it was adjustable, that would be nice, but it's a non-adjustable windshield there. The side fairings provide some decent added wind protection for your legs, and they work quite well. I do want to point out that the engine on this bike sticks out pretty far. So again, don't do too much off-road riding with this, because if you drop the engine into some rocks, you're going to be putting a hole in your engine. It does stick out. That's one thing I noticed. Also notice the very highway-friendly foot pegs, which are also not in a good position really for standing up off-road, because it's not really meant for that. And there's no serrations or anything for off-road riding. Low slung exhaust, which makes sense. Disregard these luggage racks. These are an OEM accessory that's available, but disregard that. That does not come with the bike. You've got this single piece seat, which is wide and supportive. One of the best seats in the test for sure. Controls on the NX are very basic, but also easy to use and friendly. You've got some backlighting here. You've got a traction control switch. This controls your TFT dash. Horn. Now you've got hazard lights over here, big old button, so when you're in trouble, boom, just hit those lights. 12-volt power outlet. Now, the TFT dash it's better than the previous ones. They've really improved this over the years on this bike. It does have color, and you can go in here and display different riding information and things like that. And then you've got a settings menu as well, which you can go in and configure things how you'd like to and see different features and functions. The dash works well, and you've got two different, you've got a dark mode and a light mode. I always like to run these in the dark mode, and then you can have automatic as well. If you've got a fuel gauge, a gear indicator, trip computers, which you can change down here at the bottom, some fuel consumption information, and the dash works really well. Let's climb aboard the 390R and see what's what. Oh, she's pretty tall. This feels like probably the tallest bike in the test. Although the seat height is on par with some of the other bikes, like the KLE, it feels a bit taller. Maybe I just have the suspension jacked up a little bit, but I can't flat foot this bike on both sides. Now, if I scooch off the seat, I'm flat footing. It's still extremely comfortable for me. This is my neutral seated riding position. Yeah, it feels kind of like a dirt bike in terms of the ergonomics, which is a good thing, I think. You've got good leg room. Handlebars are in a great place, very comfortable to ride sitting down. And then standing up is where this bike shows its KTM roots, right? This off-road racing kind of style of bike. So yeah, even in an attack position, like up here, this windshield is far enough. Well, it's still a little bit close. You got to be careful when you're doing that, but it's pushed forward far enough. They did think of that. Handlebars are in a great position. They're not too high where they'd be crowding you. Yeah, this feels great standing up. That's why it feels so good to ride off-road. Checking out the ergonomics and riding position on the Himalayan 450. One unique thing about the Himalayan in this class, I believe it's the only one to have this, is the seat is adjustable between two different heights. That's really nice because if you're shorter or you want to easier reach to the ground, you have it in a low position, which it is right now, you can in a couple seconds pull it off, switch two little rubber clips under the seat, and then raise it up to high position for more leg room, or if you're taller. I love that. The seat is also very wide and supportive, just really well designed on this bike compared to some of the others. Passenger seat's a little bit smaller, but the rider seat is very, very good. So let me jump on board and show you kind of the ergonomics. Now I still have the little rubbers and the foot pegs, which do reduce my legroom just by a tiny bit, maybe a 1/4 inch or like 10 millimeters, so not too big of a difference there, but just to keep that in mind. My reach to the ground is very comfortable at my height, again with the seat in the low position. What I'll point out about the Himalayan is because they moved the airbox under the tank, which is not great for maintenance, but with a more compact engine, they were really able to shove that seat down with a good seat height, but still giving you generous ground clearance for the category and really generous suspension travel as well. So really good packaging on Royal Enfield's part in this regard. The handlebars are in a very comfortable position. I'll show you my neutral seated position is just very, very comfortable. Standing up is also very good ergonomically speaking. You can rotate your handlebars, of course, to adjust that. Foot pegs are in a good place, handlebars are in a good place, and this bike feels pretty natural, even riding at a pretty elevated pace standing up or sitting down. Let me show you the riding position on the Ibex 450. First of all, the reach to the ground at my height is super easy with this factory seat, which is kind of scooped out. It's intended to make the bike friendly for shorter riders, and it really does. You can see how easy it is for me to reach the ground. Now, my neutral seated position on this bike, sorry, it's leaning a little bit there. It's pretty comfortable in terms of reach to the bars, and of course you can adjust that. But then the leg room is a little bit tight. Again, that's because they've dished out this factory seat. Many riders choose to get the rally high seat on this bike, which gives you about 2 inches or about 50 or 60 millimeters more legroom, which I would probably do for my height. But I like what they did because it's friendly for shorter riders. When I stand up on this bike, standing position, the foot pegs are in a pretty decent place for standing. The handlebars, as the handlebars come stock, they're a little bit close to you and a little bit low maybe. I would rotate them forward for a lot of off-road stuff. Handlebars are just kind of a weird bend overall on this bike, but getting into sort of an off-road position, I do feel that those bars are a little bit close to me when I get into a more aggressive position, but I think a lot of riders are going to find it comfortable because you're not really racing around aggressively on this bike most likely, but you can easily, changing that angle a little bit gives you a really useful range of adjustment there. Climbing aboard the KLE 500, let's see what we have here. I can almost flat foot the bike on both sides, almost. If I reach, I can flat foot on both sides, but it's very comfortable in my size to reach the ground on this bike. Not too tall. Here's my natural or neutral sit-down riding position. I've got really generous leg room. This is very comfortable bend in my knee, good leg room there. The bars are a tiny bit more forward than some of the bikes, but I like that because I'll show you when I stand up, but they come up very high. They're very, very comfortable. Overall, I find the ergos on this bike to be really good. Standing up in my off-road riding position like this, it feels just about perfect. The bars are really high. I think if you are a more expert off-road rider and you like a forward and low bar, the bars might feel a little bit cramped or a little bit too close to you. But I think most people are really, really going to like this in terms of standing up. It feels very comfortable. Let's climb aboard the KLR 650S and see what we have. This bike is extremely low to the ground, so if you are shorter, this could be your bike, this S model. It's very, very low. Look at the bend in my knee. I mean, it's really, really comfortable in terms of that. My neutral seated riding position, the bars are pretty close to me. I've still got decent leg room, even on this shorter model with the lower seat, It's pretty comfortable, not too bad. I could use a little more legroom though. I fit better on the regular bike. It's not a bad place to be sitting down. Now for standing is where this bike feels way off. The foot pegs are really, really awkwardly forward and I think too high up. And the bars are super close to you. So if I try to get into an aggressive off-road position, my head is into this windshield. I'm over the front handlebars. So it's all wrong. You know, these are very old school ergonomics that they did back in the 80s, which is where this bike was designed. So it's really not good for standing up and aggressive riding, but this bike doesn't really support aggressive off-road riding anyway. But if you compare this to something like the KLE has much more modern ergonomics. Let's climb aboard the NX500 and see what we have. This bike feels very low in the test. It's probably the lowest other than the KLR 650 with the S model. Very, very easy for me to flat foot. Very confidence inspiring if you're not too tall of a person or too strong. Really enjoy that. This is my neutral seated riding position. The handlebars are in a good place. They're a little bit low compared to some of the bikes. And then the bend in my knee, that's what I want you to pay attention to. Look at this compared to some of the others. The foot pegs are pretty high and the seat's pretty low, so there's not a ton of leg room. If you're a tall person, this may not be that comfortable for you. So my legs do feel a bit cramped on longer rides. Now standing up is where this bike shows that it's really a street bike. So the first thing is my boot hits this exhaust right here. It's actually rubbing through the paint on the exhaust, so it's kind of awkward there. And then the foot pegs are too high and too far to the back. So the standing position, actually I think the foot pegs might be too far forward actually. The foot pegs are just in a bad place I think for standing. They're too high especially is the issue, and I think they're actually too far forward. So I feel very awkward on this motorcycle standing up. It's not really designed for that. It's really designed to be ridden, you know, sitting down. Drop and lift time for the 390R. This is the lightest bike in the group, so should be pretty easy. Give you a good view underneath it. Dropping it down didn't feel too bad. Plastic handguards are deforming as you would expect, so get metal handguards. Yeah, with this bike, it's light enough that I can just lift it by the handlebars. That's really not too bad at all. Let's do our drop and lift on the Himalayan 450. Now, Himalayan has one thing quite unique from the factory, which is that it comes with these crash bars or protection bars. Provides meaningful protection for the radiator, which is very nice, and meaningful protection for the fuel tank. It also gives you a place to mount luggage and accessories. I really appreciate that thoughtful design, that you don't have to add that extra. Of course, this bike also comes standard with the center stand, which is, I believe, the only bike in the test that has that. And that's all factored into the weight. If you add those things to the other bikes, the weight goes up. So that is something to consider with the Himalayan. Now, let's gently drop this down. We don't have any hand guards here. We've just got these bar end weights, but these crash bars do us a lot of favors. I can see that the bike, you can't see it, but I can. The bike is resting quite a bit on the crash bar here, which is very, very nice. Now you can see a rather chintzy factory skid plate, which of course that's how all bikes really come. You got to always upgrade that. Let's go ahead and lift this thing up. This motorcycle does have a little bit more of a top-heavy feel than some of the other bikes. I will be honest about that. It's a little bit more difficult to lift than some of the other bikes. Tends to carry its weight a little bit higher. You also notice that when you're riding it and sitting on it or moving it at a slow speed. That being said, it is doable to lift it, not too bad. And again, I really like having the crash bars as standard. Let's do a gentle lift test, drop test on the Ibex 450. Okay, I can see my plastic handguard is about to snap, so hopefully we don't break that, but we're about to just from the pressure on it. But that's typical for kind of these factory plastic handguards on a lot of these bikes. The bike does fall relatively flat. There's nothing really to keep it from doing that. The fairing is kind of wide up here and a little bit vulnerable to scrapes and damages, although this is kind of empty space under here a bit. It's not too much under there. The radiator probably could use some protection, I think, from maybe a lower crash bar. And now you can see that really kind of thin stock skid plate, which is in desperate need of an upgrade. That was relatively easy to lift. Kind of average, I suppose, for the category. Not as light as the KTM, but it feels lighter and easier than some of the bikes. No struggle at all lifting it, which is a big difference from some of the heavier bikes when you go up to something like a Tenere 700 or the V-Strom. That's a compelling argument for a smaller, lighter bike. Drop and lift on the KLE 500. We've got these metal handguards because we've got the SE model. That's great. Not as strong as a bark buster. I'm not going to tell you that they are, but they're a heck of a lot better than the plastic things you get on most adventure bikes, which are really just worthless. All right, let's gently drop her down since she's not my bike. Loaner from Kawasaki, obviously, and see how we go. I wish there was like a grab handle or something on the back. Okay, so I've got her resting on the handlebar, the handguard, to give me a little extra help here. You can take a good, better look at kind of our skid plate and underneath and everything like that. This is how it's going to drop if it rests on the handlebar. If you turn the handlebar, it's going to go a little bit further. It's a pretty narrow bike, so you don't have any crash bars or anything to really give you any advantage. So it falls pretty flat. But if you were going to have this bike, you'd probably want to get a crash bar. Actually, that was easier than I thought. It just pretty much popped right up. The weight doesn't feel too high, doesn't feel too bad at all. I do wish I had a grab handle back here to hold on to, but you're probably going to get that in the aftermarket. Handguards worked well. Overall, that was really good. I'll tell you one thing, it's way easier than a KLR 650, I can tell you that. KLR 650, heaviest bike in the test, so this should be interesting. All right. Here goes nothing. Give you a good look underneath there and why you need a skid plate. I'm about to break this plastic handguard. It's digging into the ground. All right. She's a heavy girl, and it is a little difficult to lift, heavier than a lot of the others, but the weight's carried fairly low on this. I think also being the S model, it makes it a little bit easier, so it's doable, but it's pretty heavy. It's pretty heavy. NX500 drop and lift, the most street bike of the group. I kind of hate doing this, but we do have to do it now. I'm glad I'm going to do it on the left side on all the bikes because this engine really comes out far on the right side. I would worry about scratching that up, and I don't want to scratch Honda's nice motorcycle here. So, and remember, these things are not factory. This stuff is not factory. That's just part of a OEM accessory that Honda had on this bike. Yeah, it felt like there was a lot of stuff hitting the ground that shouldn't be hitting the ground. So hopefully we're not doing any damage or anything. Didn't feel too heavy, really. You can see that really no skid plate on this bike from the factory. So that would be something, if you're going to do any off-road, you'd want to protect your exhaust and your engine, oil pan, and everything like that down there, which is quite vulnerable. It feels a little more top heavy and a little bit more difficult to lift than most of the other bikes in the group, so that's something to keep in mind for sure. Feels pretty heavy, but it is doable, you know, of somebody my size and strength, but just not the easiest in the test. It looks like the shift lever did bend just a little bit. I think it's the only bike in the group where I had a little bit of slight damage from doing that. KTM 390 Adventure R 0 to 70 to 0 performance testing. This motorcycle is equipped with a quick shifter, which meaning our shifts are going to be faster, and it's just so much nicer to use a bike when it has a quick shifter. So much more fun. So let's see what we've got here. And 70. Emergency stop. All right, that's not too bad at all. I feel like that's pretty competitive with the other bikes, but we'll have to see what the timer says. What I noticed about the acceleration on this is the power. It's got a displacement disadvantage compared to, I think, all the other bikes in the test, right? Being under 400 cc. The power comes on in the high RPMs. Anything below that, like the roll-on power from like 3 to 5 is really almost nothing. But above 5,000 or 6,000, the bike really comes alive, and you have to be willing to kind of rev the beans out of it to really get moving. But once you do that, it takes off pretty well, and the bike is lighter, so it has a power to weight ratio advantage to the other bikes, even though this has a smaller engine. And then the braking is adequate, average. It's not great. It feels kind of mushy. There's a lot of dive in the suspension, but you have that long travel suspension, which pays you the dividends off-road. But the brakes are a little bit weak in my opinion. Of course, braking also comes down to the tires you have. Off-road tires like this bike is wearing a 50/50 tire. Actually, it does sacrifice some braking on the pavement compared to a road tire like some of the bikes in the test have. But overall, I felt that was really good. The quick shifter works really well, and then the ABS system works fairly good as well to keep you safe when you're doing an emergency stop. My first impressions riding this 390 after when was the last time I rode this? Maybe 9 months ago, something like that, when I finished my ownership series with this. This is obviously a different bike because this is a loaner from KTM and it's totally stock. I forgot how much I like this. I forgot how good of a package this is. Man, it is comfortable. Wind protection's amazing. It's light. It's pretty quick. It's got great features, great TFT dashboard, the best one in the test in terms of setting up all the functions and being able to use it. Wow, what a great little bike. Off-road testing, KTM 390 Adventure R. I'm going to go into the TFT. I'm going to set my ride mode to off-road. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to configure off-road. ABS is going to be set where the front is on, the rear is off. Off-road ABS mode. I love that setup, and some of the bikes in the test do not offer that. Traction control I'm going to leave turned off. It does have off-road traction control. It's one of the only bikes here that has that, and I love it personally. It allows quite a lot of slip before it intervenes, but to be fair with testing all the other bikes, most of which don't have any off-road tuned traction control, we're going to leave that turned off. I'm going to, however, leave the quick shifter on because the bike has it, and I think it's the only bike in a test to have that. It's kind of a cool thing to have. All right, let's see what we have here. Oh, yeah. Whoa! Wow, this thing feels so light and so capable. Dang. Gosh, this thing's kind of on another level to all the other bikes. It's so much smaller and lighter feeling. I will say though, having said that, the suspension, the budget suspension on this does really hold it back, especially the rear shock. The rear shock is really poor. It bottoms out so easily. Rear shock on this bike almost feels like it's blown out because it just has like no damping in it. Yeah, when you try to ride this fast on this really rough stuff, it feels like the capability is there. It just needs the suspension to back it up. If you do a suspension upgrade on this bike, that's where the magic would happen, I think. Because the chassis and the bike and everything's ready to do it. It's just the suspension, and especially that rear shock. Also, the ergonomics are really good on this. Some of the best in the group. For sitting or standing, standing position feels really nice, really natural. The foot pegs and the handlebars are in the correct place for aggressive off-road riding. Feels really, really good. Let's bottom it out. Whoa! Yeah, it bottoms just like all the other bikes there, so that's kind of a disappointment. It really is just held back by that rear shock mostly. There is a little adjustment you have in the forks, and I played with that before on this bike. In the rear shock you do have that rebound adjuster, which helps a little, but it's really just held back by that. I think if you could get some proper valving and springs and maybe heavier oil in the fork and the shock, this thing would just be unstoppable and unbeatable off-road in the category. As it is, it's still very good, and it's still more confidence inspiring because it's so light and agile and playful. It feels more like a dirt bike. It's just that suspension is the issue. Off-road part 2 on the 390R. Since this is such a good off-road bike, I'm going to give you a little extra credit. We're going to start the sand wash further down the river bed and do a little bit more just to show you the advantage of a lighter weight, more off-road capable bike. I still wish I had better tires for sand, but you know, you work with what you have, right? See, it's so much lighter than the other ones that as I negotiate this very deep sand wash, when I lose the front end, I can save it, right? I can make a dab or I can make a correction and I can keep going because it is more like a dirt bike in that regard. Whoa, this is really deep through here. Let's get standing up. It's challenging to make these corners in the sand wash. It takes a lot of practice to get confident with it. But see how much more in control I am with this bike? I'm not sledging all over the place quite as much, and I just have much more confidence. I could do this for so much longer than with the other ones. Okay, now we got to make this turn and go up our obstacle. Whoa. Yeah, see, I didn't quite hit it head on, but I can. Let's do it again. Let me go down this. It's about an 8 to 10 inch drop. Yeah, I think I touched the skid plate there. But see, that's the difference that the ground clearance makes. Let's do this again. It's hard with this run up in the sand wash. Whoa! Yeah. See, that was my mistake. I didn't hit it straight on, so I got deflected like that. That's a rider error mistake. But I cleared it and didn't crash, right? I think it's the only bike in the test that I can hit that tree root straight on and not have an accident or not break the bike. So that's impressive. So look at that. That wasn't there before. So I did use the skid plate. The skid plate is not great, but at least it's something on this bike. And this thing has so much more clearance than the other motorcycles that I'm able to take something like this. Now, this is challenging because you've got the sand here to start, you've got a steep hill, and then you've got this steep rut here, and it's also to the side. So when you hit it, it tends to shoot the bike off, right? It deflects and kind of goes out of control. So really you want to kind of line the bike up more here and try to hit it like that. but it's still a challenging obstacle uphill, unless you're like a trials rider, which I'm not. So, but I'm impressed that the bike can take it. KTM 390R freeway test. All right, we have reached our cruising altitude of 80 miles an hour. We'll begin our drink service soon. So I'm at 7,000 RPM at 80 miles an hour, 82 miles an hour. Trying not to hold up traffic because I'm in the passing lane. 7,500 RPM. I can still keep accelerating. I mean, look, 90 miles an hour is very easy to reach on this bike. We'll go back down to 80 here. The bike, yeah, there is some high frequency vibration coming through the handlebars, the foot pegs, but it's not terrible. It's fairly well under control compared to a lot of the other bikes. It's pretty average. It's really not bad. It's not as bad as I remember it. The motor does have certain RPMs where there's more vibration, and that's kind of weird. Like this RPM, it seems smoother, but then if you slow down, it might seem like it's 75. I feel like it vibrates worse than at 80, so it's just different harmonics, I guess. But if you have to spend a few hours on the freeway on this bike, that's pretty good at it, actually, surprisingly, for such a small motor. And the wind protection from this big windshield is actually very, very good. I'm in a pretty good pocket of calm air, relatively speaking. The bike does feel pretty busy. I mean, the engine's revved up pretty high, being a small engine, but I could do this for quite a while and just be perfectly fine. So it can keep up with the bigger bikes on the freeway. It's pretty impressive that it's able to do that. KTM 390 sport riding test. Give it the beans. Pretty good acceleration. So this bike, compared to some of the others in the test, because it's more dirt bike focused or more off-road designed, I guess it's taller and kind of skinny, and you know, you've got these somewhat off-road tires on it, and it's lighter. It doesn't feel quite as glued down to the highway as the other bikes. It just sort of has more of a, and I'm exaggerating that on the handlebars, but it just has more of a loose feeling to it. It's not bad. It's just when you ride it compared to some of the other heavier bikes, it doesn't feel as stable or really as confident doing this type of riding when you start to go faster. It just has, yeah, a little bit more of a dirt bike feel to it. Of course, that pays dividends when you get off-road. That being said, if you want to ride this bike in a spirited manner on a road like this, you absolutely can, and it's pretty fun. And you've got a quick shifter and all that kind of stuff. But that's how life goes. If you want to trade off some highway performance for that off-road capability, it's always a trade-off. You can't have everything. But this bike's pretty fun to ride. It's pretty snappy as long as you're willing to really let that engine rev out. I mean, again, there's very little happening below 6,000 RPM. And if you're used to riding a larger displacement bike, this is gonna feel very strange to you. But as long as you keep that engine on the boil, you're gonna have a really fun time. Test notes on the 390 Adventure R. I measured 63 miles a gallon, which I thought was pretty nice. Let's talk about the comfort a little bit. So I mentioned the wind protection is pretty good on this bike, especially from here up. The seat, however, I didn't find to be comfortable. It feels like sitting on a 2x4. It's hard and it kind of digs into my butt, and yeah, I was moving around a lot. So I found that to be pretty uncomfortable. However, the ergonomics are superb. A lot of leg room, a great reach to the bars, very comfortable from a rider triangle point of view. And then off-road, of course, it's pretty amazing, except that really bouncy soft suspension does hold it back, I think, from being truly excellent. Although the lightweight really plays in. On the highway, it does feel a little bit lighter, so it doesn't feel quite as stable and glued down as some of the other bikes, but still a competent bike to do the highway with. So pretty amazing package overall. Himalayan 450 performance testing. Let's go. Come on. Come on, baby. Don't let me down. And 70. Emergency stop. Oh, okay. This engine makes a really like linear power and torque. It has good power and torque at every RPM. It's not like some of the bikes where you really have to rev it. Like the mid-range on this bike is exceptional, really good. The acceleration is steady and consistent, but it's not fast, right? It's probably not one of the faster bikes of the group, but it's adequate. And then the braking power, while the brakes have kind of a soft feel, which actually makes this bike kind of nice off-road. On the road, the brakes do feel a bit soft. Once you lay all the way into the levers, the brakes are there and it stops adequately. I think I would look at getting a better pad compound, and I think that would go a long way on this bike. So I have a lot of experience riding these bikes in the past on past bike tests that I've done, but I forgot how much I love this little motorcycle. It's got good torque, it's comfortable, it's got good features. The windshield and fairing, because it's almost non-existent right now in the summer because it's hot. I love all the airflow I'm getting through my mesh Climb jacket. It's really great, really comfortable, and there's no wind buffeting because the windshield is so low, you don't get the dirty air coming on your helmet. So I like it at the moment, but I think for touring, you know, the wind protection and colder weather would be an issue. You might have to look at getting a bigger windshield or something like that. But I really truly enjoy riding this bike. It feels very grown up. Oh, and the suspension is excellent on this bike. It may have the best suspension of the group, despite not being very adjustable except for rear preload. The suspension setup is excellent on this motorcycle. All right, off-road on the Himalayan 450, we're going to turn ABS off to the back. Little button here. It's really simple and easy to do that. Now what's going on here? Now it's saying that I can't change. There we go. ABS turned off. You have to give it a second before you start rolling once you change that ABS setting. All right. Wow. God, the suspension is so good on this bike. The tires are not good, obviously, but the suspension is phenomenal on this bike compared to the others. I would say the damping and spring rates are just spot on, which is so rare for a bike to come that way out of the box. Like even sitting down, I can really go through this rough terrain. Now let's try standing up. Oh yeah, this thing feels so confident and stable and in control. The suspension tracks the ground really well. It still gives you a pretty good ride. It's not undersprung or underdamped like most motorcycles are, and it really gives you confidence to ride much faster and a more control. Also, this engine, wow, it's really rough riding that fast. I'm not riding the other bikes that fast through this rough terrain. Also, the engine I can pretty much leave in third gear and just tractor. I mean, it's got a good tractor factor for a smaller engine, but it revs out well and you don't have to shift very much. Also, the ergonomics for standing are fairly dialed in for somebody of my size. Really impressed by that. This bike is so well thought out. You kind of think of Royal Enfield, you don't really think of like high performance, but actually compared to the other bikes in the category, I would say this is higher performance in a lot of respects. Wow, this is really, really good. I mean, I can come close to bottoming the suspension, but those are some really big washouts, and I am just bashing the bike into them. And this thing has a center stand. See, I bottomed the rear, but it was a soft bottom, not a very harsh bottom there on that one. But I was going pretty quick. Also, I really enjoy having the center stand. That's just a great feature. And unlike a lot of bikes with the center stand, this one doesn't seem to be a big issue for off-road. It's tucked out of the way pretty well. Yep, I love having that. And then you can change a tire, fix a flat. You could, you know, pack your luggage, do bike maintenance, whatever, having the center stand. Really, really nice. And it's the only bike in the test that has it. Off-road test part 2 with the 450 Himalayan. Okay. Oh my God, I'm gonna get stuck with these tires. These are essentially, oh man. Okay, trying to grip the bike with my legs, trying not to use the handlebars. Oh my God. Yeah, they're not the right tires for sand, but I'm getting through. I'm getting through it, and the bike is has a very gentle, stable handling feeling. It doesn't knife in like some of the bikes. Okay, let's try to hit. Oh. Okay. I didn't scrape the skid plate. That was good. Pretty good ground clearance on this bike. It's one of the, I think it might be the second best in the test behind the KTM, so pretty generous ground clearance if you have to clear things. I do appreciate that. Let's really drop off this tree root and see. Yeah, I'm scraping a little bit there. Let's kind of see what we've got. Yeah, I mean, it will hang up just like any bike. KTM has a little bit more. The plastic skid plate is stronger than you think, actually. From talking to the guys at Royal Enfield who engineered it, it's actually fairly strong, but if I was going to have this bike, I'd still get an upgraded plate to protect that. But yeah, pretty capable little machine, honestly. Really, really is. Freeway test of the Himalayan 450. Let's go. Alright, let's get merged here onto the freeway. A little bit windy out here today. Let's get up to our cruising altitude of 80 miles per hour. There we go. Alright. This bike does have quite a bit of high frequency vibration. You can see it in the mirrors. You can feel it in the foot pegs, you can feel it in the handlebar grips. Despite their efforts to put rubber isolators in the foot pegs and the handlebars, which does help, but you still feel quite a bit of that high frequency buzz. So at 80 miles an hour, I'm at 6,200 RPM. Pretty buzzy. The bike does feel like it's working fairly hard. Also, I really can't see out of the mirrors. Also, it's extremely windy because not really having any wind protection to speak of means that you're taking the full force of the wind. I guess actually, oh, it's windy. The windshield does keep the wind kind of off your chest a little bit. Really having to keep the throttle on here. Yeah, so pretty buzzy, pretty windy. Not the best bike for doing this right here, if I'm honest. But it can do it. It has the power to do it, and it's okay, but it's not the best. Sport testing the Himalayan 450. The microphone in my helmet was unplugged for this segment, unbeknownst to me, so we'll have to do this as a voiceover, but I'll try to recreate exactly what I was feeling. The Himalayan 450 has the slowest handling of the test, so it's got the slowest turn-in. Now, if you've ever heard a motorcycle review where they tell you about flickable bikes, or this bike is agile and flickable side to side, the Himalayan is pretty much the opposite of that. However, I do think this is an acceptable trade-off for an adventure motorcycle that is designed for off-roading and touring, where stability is more important than flickability or agile handling. That being said, once you do get it kind of cranked into the corner, that takes more effort than the other bikes, obviously, but once you do get it into a corner, it's very stable and very reassuring. It's got a very relaxed and kind of stretched out suspension geometry and a good wheelbase to it. So it's safe and predictable and stable, and I think that's a good thing. It's still enjoyable to ride on a back road like this, and it has good mid-range power, and you don't have to rev the bike out too much to get to the power and the torque. We've talked about the brakes already. The brakes are a weak point of this bike, and if I had this bike, I would be looking at perhaps upgrading the brake pad compound to get a better brake feel from the front lever, because as it is, you kind of almost need to use 2 fingers, and I think that's what I was showing here in the video, as opposed to 1 finger on most modern motorcycles. So the brakes are a bit of a weak point, and I think this would be made even worse if you had luggage and or a passenger.
Test notes on the Himalayan 450. Overall, pretty impressive performance from this bike, pretty comfortable. Works pretty well in just about every situation. With this really small windshield and not much fairing, you do get a lot of wind. I got a lot of bugs on my helmet, but I had no wind buffeting, so that was kind of a nice, smooth experience from there. The seat looks like it's going to be really comfortable, but it does have some pressure points, and I didn't find it to be too great after a few hours, so seat could be better. On road, very stable, predictable, you know, just kind of like we talked about. Engine works well. Off-road, great suspension, very stable, really solid off-road bike. And I really like some of the extra features on here. The crash bars, the center stand, the adjustable seat, which I use to go up and down and kind of change my riding position. Yeah, really great machine.
CFMOTO Ibex 450 0 to 70 to 0 testing. Let's go. All right, let's talk about that. The acceleration is, I would say, adequate, but it doesn't feel like it's the fastest in the group. It feels like it's maybe kind of mid-pack. However, it sounds so incredible. This engine has such a nice sound to it that you almost feel like you're going faster than you are, but then you look down, you're not going that fast. But it's incredibly smooth. The engine has 0 vibration at any RPM. It's one of the smoothest motorcycle engines in existence. It is just unbelievable how well balanced it really is. The shifting works very well. It's extremely slick shifting. And then the braking, okay, the braking is a little bit soft on this bike. It does stop adequately, but the feel is fairly soft at the lever, especially the front brake. The rear brake actually feels pretty good. The front feels decidedly soft. However, what I would do would be if I had this bike, the first thing I'd do, well, I'd put handguards on the skid plate, but after that, I'd put on different brake pads with a more aggressive compound. I have a feeling from testing other bikes like this that would really fix that. So there's a tip for you if you get one of these. But overall, smooth operator, adequate acceleration, adequate brakes. Feels very good so far. So far, very comfortable. Good wind protection. Love this adjustable windshield. Love the GPS bar. The dash is great. Motor feels great. Riding position feels pretty good. The seat's a little bit too low. I would get the taller seat if it was me, but yeah, pretty good so far.
Ibex 450 off-road test. First thing I love is this right here. Look at that. I mean, come on. Why don't all bikes do that? That is fantastic. Can lower that down when I'm off-road, get that windshield out of my way. What a good feature. So smart. Now, the other thing I like about the Ibex, probably one of my favorite in the test, is the off-road electronic setup. So the bike has traction control on ABS, which is great. And I love having the traction control for highway. To put it into off-road mode, you just hold down this button right here for a couple seconds, and then it comes up off-road and rear wheel ABS off. So that's great. I've still got my front ABS on, which I prefer for adventure riding. We're not enduro riding here. We're not doing a dirt bike competition. Adventure riding, front ABS on, rear off. That's perfect. And then we've got traction control turned off. So super simple. Why can't everybody make it that easy? All right, let's go. The first thing I noticed about the Ibex compared to a lot of the other bikes is the suspension is actually pretty good. And unlike most adventure bikes that come stock with really soft suspension, really undersprung, underdamped suspension that sort of just floats around and feels really vague and bottoms out a lot. The Ibex isn't really like that. You know, for a 200-pound guy or 90-kilogram guy like myself, this bike is actually sprung pretty decently and has pretty good hold up. I still think it would benefit greatly from, you know, taking the suspension into a suspension shop and having them tune it and spring it for you. That would make a world of difference on this bike. But in stock form, this thing is super, super impressive on the suspension, and it is adjustable. You do have adjustments on the suspension, which I really, really like. Overall off-road, I will say on the suspension it can be a little harsh feeling on the high-speed compressions compared to some of the bikes. So if you're looking for a super plush feel out of the box, maybe this is not as soft as some of the others. It kind of has more feedback from the rough parts of the trail. But of course you can adjust it and it will break in a bit over time. The throttle response on this bike, it does have a tiny bit of like low speed on-off throttle jerkiness. It has a little bit of that, but it's not too bad. They've improved that since it first came out. And then I was going to talk about the overall response of the engine is incredible for off-road because I don't have to shift that much. It's got a very good low end and mid-range smooth linear response for off-roading. It makes off-road riding just really pleasurable and easy without doing a lot of shifting. Just what a fantastic little motor. The bike feels light and agile, definitely feels a lot smaller and lighter than something like a 10 or a 700 or something like that. That's the great thing about the Ibex is you get a lot of the features that you want, but in a more manageable package. Yeah, the suspension does kind of kick around quite a bit in the rocks. I think I would have to spend some time kind of playing with the adjustments and doing things like that. Let's try to bottom it out here. No, I didn't bottom it out. Now that's impressive. All the other bikes that I can recall on that bump, I bottomed out. Did I bottom the 390? I don't remember at this point. So many videos, but man, that's an impressive performance from the suspension. As an overall off-road package, considering how good a road bike this thing is darn good. Off-road test part 2 on the Ibex 450. Come on. Actually not too bad, pretty stable in the sand. Tires could use some improvement though, but it's very manageable. Doesn't feel, you know, too top heavy or anything. Now let's deal with our obstacle here. Okay, now I can't hit that log the way I want to, or the way that I want to demonstrate anyway. It's not really the way I want to hit it, but let me show you the issue. It's not really an issue so much, but it just has to do with the stock skid plate. So if I smash into that obstacle with this stock skid plate, it's going to be a bad time because it's a very thin skid plate and the oil pan is very it's right down there. So if you impact the skid plate, it can punch through the oil pan, and then you're having a bad day because now you broke the bottom of your engine and you're going to leak out all the oil. So I'm not going to do that right now. But with a better skid plate, I'd be confident in, you know, tackling some pretty good obstacles and things like that. But really it's just a limitation of that skid plate not wanting to damage a bike that does not belong to me. But I will say, like off-road, the feel of the bike, the weight, the handling, it's really quite good.
Ibex 450 freeway test. Let's hit it. All right, our cruising altitude of 80 miles an hour has been reached. Okay, it feels good. It feels smooth. Like there's no vibration. I look down, I'm going, it's 7,500 RPM. But there's no vibration. It's insane how smooth this engine is. Just phenomenal. Wind protection is not too bad. It's pretty good. I've got the windshield all the way up. Stable, comfortable. Really doesn't feel like too, you know, some of the bikes feel like a little bit kind of small out here, but this one doesn't feel bad at all. Really. I'd be very comfortable riding this bike all day on the freeway. I think about this speed, about 80 or about 130 kilometers an hour is about a comfortable speed. If I go, yeah, so the RPM starts to get a little bit high at about 85. But this is fine. This is great. I could do this all day. Even the mirrors are excellent on this bike. Really clear, big, good view. I mean, I would still change them out for double take mirrors, but honestly, the mirrors are awesome. This is such an impressive bike. It just does everything well. Sport riding on the Ibex 450. Let's go. How I would describe the Ibex on a road like this is safe, predictable, comfortable, and relaxing. It's not super fast, obviously, none of these bikes are, but it handles nicely. It doesn't have the sharpest turn in, but it's very stable and predictable. It holds the line well. These factory tires work pretty well on the street, and you can lean the bike pretty good without feeling too wobbly. The motor, it rewards being revved out like this. Even when you do that, you're not going to be going very fast, but that's all right. Fourth gear right now, going about 60. I could shift up, but I like having the roll-on power. Yeah, handles great. The suspension can be a little rough on some of the sharper high-speed like impacts, like these cracks in the road, but overall it's pretty good. This is just a nice, pleasant experience. It also makes a nice sound, which does add to the overall experience. Really do enjoy that. And then we've talked about the braking. The braking could be improved. I think better brake pads will go a long way towards sorting that out. Yeah, like when I hit that bump right there, a little bit sharp of an impact. Maybe the suspension could use a little bit of fiddling with to get that kind of tuned out. The bike would be nice if it had maybe 5 more horsepower and a little bit smoother suspension. Then I think it would be class leading at that point. But as it is, I do think maybe the KLE500 has a bit of an edge for street riding.
Test notes on the Ibex 450. Just got finished with the ride. The windshield does cause some noise and buffeting. I think it's quieter when it's down. Maybe I would look at putting on one of those visors or getting a slightly wider windshield. It can be a little bit buffeting at times, although the overall wind protection is pretty good, and this wide kind of fairing gives your legs some pretty good protection. On the seat actually I found to be pretty comfortable, but it is a little bit low for me personally. At my height, I'd probably get the higher seat to give myself a bit more leg room, as my legs did feel a tiny bit cramped at my height. But again, then the reach to the ground is really nice, so you have to decide on your trade-off there. But the padding on the seat works pretty well. Overall performance, I'm extremely impressed with it, as I always have been in the past. Off-road it's good, on-road it's good. It just does everything really well, and it's got really nice features and components, and it's unbelievably a very good, unbelievably good bike for the money. That's what I'm trying to say. My fuel economy I measured at 57 miles a gallon. Now, do note that the computer said I got 70 miles a gallon, so there seems to be something wrong in the programming of the computer, but I did not get 70, I got 57, which is a big difference, but that's still a pretty good result.
Kawasaki KLE500 performance testing. This motorcycle has the most horsepower on paper in the test. Let's see if it lives up to that.
Ooh, yeah. I feel like I did that faster than the other bikes, but I guess the timer will tell when I look up all the times.
Yeah, this bike feels pretty quick. The thing you got to know about this engine is you got to let it rev out to just about 10,000 RPM to get the most out of it.
It's, you know, again, all these engines are on the smaller side. This one likes to rev out. When you do that, it feels pretty quick. It honestly feels like the engine is just a little bit, has more to give than all the other bikes in this test. And then the braking felt very good. Actually, I was surprised. The braking felt very confidence inspiring. The ABS worked well. The braking power felt good. This bike just feels kind of on initial impression off the cuff compared to the others, like a more motorcycle. It feels a bit bigger, just a bit more substantial, like it has a bigger engine. The components are nice. Like, I like this handlebar. The ergonomics are good. It feels more grown up, like almost a half size bigger in some ways. And I really like this TFT dash on this SE model. I think that's really nice. Good mid-range power. It doesn't feel underpowered like some of the other bikes do, like you're having to really work to get the speed out of it. It doesn't really give me that feeling. It just feels like a larger capacity bike, if that makes sense. And handling feels nice and playful and nimble to me so far. I do notice this windshield, although it looks pretty tall, I've got it in the middle position. It's pretty far, I can't even reach it. It's pretty far away from you, so there's more wind buffeting than I would like, but I think you could probably change the windshield and figure things out with the wind buffeting, but that's my initial impression.
KLE500 off-road test. There's no traction control on this bike to worry about, so it's kind of nice. And then for ABS, I just click this once, and then I hold it down, and then, yeah, I'm going to get that coming on solid. So now, let's see if that worked. Let's make sure that ABS is off. Yes. Now the thing about the KLE is that you can only turn the whole ABS system off. You can't leave the front on and turn the rear off, and that is a criticism I have. You should be able to do that on an adventure bike, because it's much safer to leave that front on, even in the dirt, than to have that turned off. But oh well, we'll survive. We'll do without it. All right, let's go.
Wow. This thing's pretty quick. This thing's pretty powerful. It just feels more powerful than all the other bikes, I guess because it is. This is a stable platform, man. This chassis, I don't know what the suspension rake is off the top of my head, but man, it feels so stable. Very confidence inspiring. The suspension is on the firm side of things, but I like it. I think it means that when you go off-road like this, it feels pretty supportive. It doesn't just bottom out right away. Now, it will bottom out, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But gosh, this is a stable platform. It does a pretty good job on these rough terrain. Pretty darn good job, I have to say. Pretty composed up to a point where then it does bottom out. Oh, the ergonomics, superb. I think my favorite ergonomics of this test, standing up on this bike, there's so much room. The bars are really high and kind of far forward, which feel perfect for standing up and riding a bit faster off-road. The foot pegs are in a perfect position, unlike the KLR, which are in a very awkward position. So my overall off-road impression of this bike, actually, if you just can forget about the limited ground clearance for a minute, and this engine also has excellent low and mid-range power compared to most of the others. I have to do a lot less shifting on this bike. I can just leave it in one gear and it just has excellent power from the bottom through the mid-range, which is not the case with a lot of the bikes in the test. I love this engine. Oh man, that didn't sound good. Sound like I just hit the skid plate hard. Okay, let's do bottom out right here. See what we have. Oh yeah, I mean, it bottoms out, but honestly all the bikes do. All the bikes in this test are bottoming out pretty much on this stuff. The skid plate sounded like it took a pretty good hit. Let's hopefully we didn't break anything already. We just started.
No, it doesn't look like it took much of a hit. I just think that when it reaches the bottom of its suspension travel, the skid plate is just so close to the ground that if you have any imperfection in a trail, which you will because it's a trail, it's not a highway, that you end up hitting this. And that is a major Achilles heel or downside of this bike. I like everything else about it, really, except for that ground clearance. Yeah, that's so unfortunate because there's really no way to fix that, is there? KLE 500 Off-Road Test Part 2. Let's hit the sand. Wow, this thing is remarkably stable in sand. Even with these almost bald stock tires, remarkably stable. Good chassis. All right. Now, I can't hit that route. You're probably tired of seeing that now in this test, the same place, but that's the way this testing goes. I can't hit that route because of the ground clearance. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to position the camera, take the camera off my helmet here, and show you what I mean with this bike. Alright, so here's what I'm talking about with this KLE. Now, on a lot of adventure or dual sport motorcycles, I'd be able to ride the motorcycle off this tree route and clear it without bashing in the engine, right? But look what's happening on the KLE. Now, of course, if you're going at some speed, if you launch off this, you're going to be able to clear it. But what if you're going slower, or what if you're coming up from this way? So this tree route presents a real issue with this bike, which is that the belly is too low for really serious off-road riding. So if you have obstacles you have to deal with, this becomes a real challenge. I bottomed the bike out on a skid plate just going over this maybe 6 or 7 inch kind of obstacle in the trail. And yeah, so it is an issue in the real world. It's going to depend on, do you have to go over obstacles like this or not? If you're off-roading, it's just smooth gravel roads and fire roads, you don't have too many rocks and logs and things like that, then you're probably going to be fine and the bike does well. But the minute you get into anything technical, this low belly does present a challenge.
KLE 500 freeway test. Let's go. Power. Well, there's 0 to 80 miles an hour. That's pretty impressive. This thing gets up to speed very easily. Alright, we're already at our cruising speed of 80 miles an hour. We've got some nice open road in front of us. So let's talk about this bike. The wind protection is pretty good, actually. It does have buffeting though. I feel like the vertical windshield and the fact that it's far away from you creates quite a bit of wind buffeting. Let's talk about the engine. So I'm at 72, let's call it 7,500, yeah, just under 7,500 RPM at around 80 miles an hour, which is pretty high, but keep in mind the engine revs to over 10,000 RPM, so it's not too bad. Now the buzziness, yeah, the engine does have kind of a grittiness or a high frequency vibration to it. It feels buzzy. Now, it's worse at certain speeds. At certain speeds it's okay, and then it's got like harmonic frequencies where it tends to buzz more. Honestly, sitting here at 80, I could do this all day. It's not much vibration really to speak of. There's a little bit, and what is there is kind of a tingly kind of feeling. As long as you don't if you death grip the handlebars, you feel it quite a bit. If you're loose more on the controls, which I always recommend, then you don't feel too much of the vibration, honestly. I don't feel too much of the foot pegs or the seat either. It's definitely better than like the KLR, that's for sure. And actually, if I had to spend a lot of time on the freeway, this would be a pretty good bike to do it with. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this performance. And I've got plenty of roll-on power. Look at that, 85, 90. I've got plenty of roll-on power with this bike. It's pretty impressive performance for a small adventure bike for highway riding. KLE 500 Sport Riding Test. Let her rip. This thing is pretty fun. This thing's got a little bit of that Kawasaki Ninja DNA in it. Of all the bikes in the test, I find myself riding this one the fastest on a road like this. It's got the most power. It handles really well. It steers well, but it's also very confidence inspiring. It doesn't feel like it's, you know, moving around. It just feels nice and glued down to the road. The brakes give you good confidence. Suspension works pretty well. It's not too soft and floaty. For an upright kind of dirt bike rally looking thing, this thing does pretty well. If you let the engine sing and really rev out, I mean, this thing can probably keep up with some higher capacity bikes if you know how to ride it. Really impressive. The gearbox is excellent as well, and once you learn how to do it, you can shift without the clutch very easily. Even though there's no quick shifter, clutchless shifting is very easy to do once you get the hang of syncing up the gear in the engine. So yeah, I think this is maybe the best in the group for doing this kind of riding as you're seeing me doing here on a mountain road. It's surprisingly good. It just feels very competent. Again, it almost feels like this bike bridges the gap a little bit. It doesn't quite feel like a beginner kind of budget bike like some of the others do. Like, it feels a little bit more grown up than that, and I can't exactly tell you why that is. Maybe it's just this more powerful engine. Maybe the chassis is just really good. I don't know. But this thing has, look at the mid-range pull on this thing. It's really impressive for a bike in this category anyway.
Test notes on the KLE 500. On the comfort front, the seat was average. It looked like it was going to be comfortable. It felt good at first, but then it kind of fell apart after an hour or two. Felt kind of hard and kind of feel the edges of it, so my butt's pretty sore from that. I would say it's the middle of pack for the test. I got 59 miles per gallon measured, calculating by hand. The windshield, I'm getting used to it. I feel like, again, because it's kind of far away from you, that it creates a little more buffeting. You can adjust it as well. I did initially ride it in the high position, and I found that it buffeted pretty bad, so I moved it down one notch. That seems to be better. It looks like I might try moving it down again. Off-road, we saw the limitations of the low belly. That really is a limitation. It's a pretty great bike beyond that, though. And then as a street bike, it's pretty exceptional in this category. Really, really enjoyed it. KLR 650, 0 to 70 to 0 performance testing. Come on, old girl, do not let me down on this one. I know you're the oldest bike in this test, basically 40 years old at this point with the basic design. Do not let me down. Show us what you got.
Oh yeah! Feel the power! Come on, baby, don't run out of runway on me. Show us what you got. Show us what you got. 70. Whoa! I forgot this bike doesn't have ABS. Holy moly. Okay.
So without ABS brakes, I had to be a little bit more careful there. I started to slide. Wow, I forgot you could still get these without ABS. Man, I'm such an idiot. All right, well, that was entertaining. So the acceleration felt pretty leisurely. It's just a steady stream of torque. It's the biggest engine, so people think, oh, it's more powerful, but actually it has less horsepower than most of the other bikes. But what it does have is more torque, so you feel like a steady kind of surge of acceleration, but it doesn't really build. It just sort of is there in the background. It's probably the slowest bike in the test because it's the heaviest bike in the test, and it only has 40 horsepower. And in terms of the braking, Well, it's really disappointing this model doesn't have ABS. I know you can get these with ABS, and that's what I would do 100%, because that's a major safety hazard not having it when you're riding on the street especially. But beyond that, the brakes are pretty bad. They're pretty soft, probably the worst brakes in the test probably. But you know, if you're just riding, if you're not riding with a passenger and a ton of luggage, they're probably adequate for what you're going to do. But please get ABS brakes. This thing is downright scary without it.
Power! 65 miles an hour. Woo-wee! I can tell you one thing right off the bat with this, the wind protection on this bike might be the best in the group. The fairing is incredibly effective, and I've got this windshield in a high position. You can adjust it 2 levels. My gosh, this thing is comfortable to ride. Just like a big sofa, big couch going down the road.
KLR 650 off-road test. Now you cannot get a KLR with traction control. It doesn't exist, and probably don't really need it anyway on this bike. And ABS, as I found out about 20 minutes ago when I nearly had a crash doing the braking test, this test bike that I have is not equipped with ABS. I forgot that it's one of the only motorcycles sold in 2026 that doesn't have ABS. It's crazy. Anyway, so let's ride off-road. Now, I have a ton of experience personally with KLR 650s off-road. What you got to know about the KLR is it's designed to sit down and just bulldoze through the terrain. If you just kind of sit down and plow through stuff and don't go too fast, it is stable, it is comfortable, it'll go almost anywhere you point it, except for the fact that until you run out of ground clearance and bash the skid plate or break the bottom of the engine off, as the case with this bike, because there is no skid plate on this bike, or there's a little plastic thing that doesn't even do anything, so that's a consideration. And then the handling is just predictable. It's just so safe. I mean, look, I can take my hands off the bars and ride this bike. Look, hit ruts and stuff. It's so stable. It's got like a 30-degree rake on it. And then standing up, yeah, the ergonomics for standing are a little bit awkward. The foot pegs are not really in the right place. They're not very modern in terms of the ergonomics for modern adventure bikes. You know, the foot pegs are kind of weird, but you can do it and you can get better foot pegs and change the position a little bit, and that would help. So I tend to just sit down on these KLRs and just bulldoze through everything, and that works because you save energy and you can ride all day like this. It's a great bike for off-road touring. The suspension, I mean, this is the S model, so we have a little bit less travel, which does hurt the performance off-road compared to the standard KLR. So unless you're really short and you need the S, I would get the regular one. It's quite a bit better off-road, and you also lose ground clearance with this S model as well. But having said all that, it does a surprisingly good job of soaking up rough terrain. But again, just don't get aggressive with her. If you get aggressive with her, she's going to be upset. She's going to be in a bad mood if you do that. So don't do that. Don't get her in a bad mood. Just ride her kind of gentle, and that's what she likes. But God, it's so freaking stable. Just a bulldozer. And then that torque is really good because you don't have to shift very much. You don't have to rev the engine real high. You could just kind of keep plowing through everything. And there she goes. The suspension will bottom if you try to ride fast. Obviously, it's a heavy bike, the heaviest in the test. Bottom out rut, and we did bottom the bike out in the back for sure. So there we go. I'm very comfortable riding this off-road. It's kind of easy to ride. It doesn't feel as heavy as the spec sheet would suggest. Almost lost my phone mount there. It just sort of belies the specs, I guess, and works pretty well. But in technical terrain, this thing is a handful, as you already. KLR 650 off-road test part 2, sand wash and then obstacle. Oh man. Whoa. Oh man. Ooh. Whoa. That's a little bit crazy. A little bit crazy. better tires would help. And I just couldn't get my speed up through there, but it'll get more stable if you get your momentum up and get your body position right. But it is very heavy to deal with. And I almost got stuck at the start. So going up the obstacle here, we're going to have to take it very easy. Let me show you the reason. Let me show you the reason why we can't. Let me show you the reason why I can't take this route, this 8-inch obstacle, straight on with this bike. I'll show you right now.
Here's the reason right here. You see this? That's the oil drain plug. If you hit that oil drain plug, if you don't put a real skid plate on here, this plastic one doesn't cover it. So if you take it any sort of impact, it's going to shear off the oil drain plug. All the oil will come out of your engine and you're done. You're done. So if you get one of these bikes, the first thing you got to do is replace this skid plate. So that's why, otherwise I'd have no problem ramming this bike into the rut and going over it if I had a proper skid plate on it.
KLR 650 freeway test. Come on, old girl, show us what you got here. Full power. Listen to that growl. Woo-wee. Okay, we're at our target cruising altitude of 80 miles an hour. You may now move about the cabin. Cruising it on the freeway on this bike, what do I notice? It's extremely stable. Extremely stable. The wind protection is exceptional. The motor, okay, so the motor feels really busy. It's only 5 speeds. I think it's the only 5-speed in this whole group. And you really notice that it really feels like you need a 6th gear. Cruising at this speed, which is probably more like 75 actual speed, because you know speedometers are always high, it feels awfully busy to me. There's no tachometer, so I don't know how much abuse I'm giving it, but I know it's there. And then the vibration actually is pretty well under control. I don't really feel any through the foot pegs or the handlebars. I do feel a lot, however, through the seat. So the vibes are there. They're just kind of, they have rubber mounted bars and bar end weights and all that to try to manage it. And the foot pegs are rubber mounted as well. Once you start making changes to this bike, you know, to make it better, then that's where the vibrations come in, because you change your handlebars and you get rid of the bar and weights, you put on those solid foot pegs and all that. That's where you get more of the vibration. But as it comes, the vibration's pretty darn well under control, under 80 miles an hour, except through the seat, where I feel my whole butt just sort of buzzing, you know. So if you like to feel your butt buzzing, then I guess this is a good machine for you. Sport riding test with the KLR 650. Give it the beans. And I say that, but nothing much happens. Sort of just makes noise and feels like it's rattly. I'm being too harsh though. You know, the KLR, what could you say? It's just sort of dependable, it's stable. It's not sporty. Like, you see, there's not much response from the engine. When you're already up at speed, there's not much roll-on power. It doesn't have much horsepower, and it's heavy. So it's not really sporty. And then if you downshift, it goes a little bit better, but doesn't really rev out very well. It's not too happy doing that. In terms of handling, it's alright. It's kind of slow and lazy to turn in, which I'm okay with, actually, because it's just not sporty in its character in any way. And then that stability pays dividends when you're off-road riding this bike. There's a lot of flex to this bike. It's an old design, it's an old frame, it's bolts together in the middle, and everything just feels a bit squishy, which actually kind of gives us some character and makes some people like it, because it's just very soft feeling. But you can't ride this really in a hurried manner. Just like in the off-road, same thing. It doesn't like to be rushed on the street either. That's okay. And then the braking, we talked about the braking, but the braking is just it's okay, but it's not really up to modern standards. and I'd like to see a little bit better braking system. Plus, they should just make ABS standard and then give you an off switch. That would be a lot safer, because riding without ABS, man, if something jumps out on the road and you hit the brakes, you're going to be sliding and crashing. It's just the way the human brain works. So really would like to see that. Yeah, so it's not sporty, it's not super fun to ride like on a road like this, but it gets the job done. It just cruises along, and it's okay. One big downside I have found to this bike on riding like this is that when you reach a certain lean angle, your foot pegs or your boots will start to scrape the ground, because it's a characteristic, I think. Well, first of all, the KLR already has kind of a low slung engine and foot peg, but then with this S model, they chop it down, they chop out the suspension and make it lower, and so you will scrape very easily. And like if you have a suspension compression and you're leaned over, all of a sudden you're touching down, and it's very sketchy, very not really safe, and really alarming. So that's one caution I would give you about buying, if you want to buy this S model KLR. I know it's appealing if you're shorter, but be aware of that. It is really sketchy when you're leaned over and you hit a bump and the bottom's out on your boots or your foot peg. It's pretty low to the ground. That is a bit of a flaw with this bike. And then you can see there's not a whole lot of passing power. You kind of just twist the throttle and pray that you're going to make it around the car you're trying to pass.
Test notes on the KLR 650. I kind of wish I didn't have the S model, because I feel like that does hold it back a little bit. The engine sits super low and is super vulnerable with that drain plug sticking down. That really holds you back off-road. If you own one, you're going to get a skid plate, of course. The highway performance is comfortable. Like this seat, however, this seat being shaved out to make it lower versus the standard bike is not nearly as comfortable as the one on the standard KLR. So that's also a big compromise with the S model. The wind protection was very good on this bike. I've got the windshield in a higher position. Let's see, the measured fuel economy, I measured it at 51 miles a gallon. I tested the NX the first half of the day and got 67. So that shows you the difference in engineering between something that's like a 40-year-old design and something that's a newer design. Massive difference in fuel economy. Honda NX500, 0 to 70 to 0, or 0 to 130 to 0 in kilometers an hour. Do as fast as we can.
Okay, I was pretty impressed by that.
I can definitely smell the brakes, but that's all right. Nothing's on fire. The acceleration felt very good to me for a bike with, 47 horsepower. Shifting was great. Engine felt smooth. The braking felt very adequate. Not amazing, but very adequate. I think these road tires help with that, instead of having more of a knobby tire. And now this bike has better brakes than it did in previous years, and that makes a huge difference. So I think that's a really good performance. Honda NX500 off-road test. All right, traction control turned off. Let's go. Whoa! Whoa! If you try to sit down and ride, the suspension kind of bounces you out of the seat. Okay, let's twist it on here on this open part. Yeah, it feels good here. It's just when you get to the bumpy stuff, it's quite apparent the limitations of the suspension. Let's ride up through the ruts and the rocks. Ooh. Yeah, you gotta go easy on this thing. I can immediately feel that this bike is not very at home in rough terrain. You really notice the limited suspension travel and the bouncy nature of it. probably that smaller front wheel is also contributing to that. However, the engine response is excellent for off-road riding. There's no way to turn off the ABS on this motorcycle. Having said that, the ABS does stop you quite well in the dirt on a road like this. If you were in sand or mud or deep gravel, steep hill, I think that ABS would be a problem. And it's one of the only bikes in the test where it doesn't have a way to turn off the ABS. The other downside that I notice immediately with the NX is the ergonomics. The foot pegs are way too high and way too far forward. Oh, to really ride this comfortably if you're a larger person. At my size, the ergonomics are too cramped. The foot peg position is very awkward for when you try to stand off-road. And these foot pegs have no grip at all. They don't have any, you can't, pull the rubbers out like you can on a lot of the other bikes. Okay, that was bottom out rut. That's usually where I end the testing, or I end the filming anyway. That rut there that we bottom out a lot of the bikes, and this one did bottom out on the back. NX500 off-road test part 2. We're going to go up the sand wash and then go up our obstacle. Oh my god. Okay. Whoa. Okay. No. I can't get a stable footing because of the tires, I think, is the problem. Oh my gosh. With better tires, I think it'd be okay. Okay, now let's turn and try to go up. Oh man, no, I don't think we can. I think I'm going to break the engine if I hit that log. If I hit that thing, I'm going to break the engine off the bottom of it. So let's go on the side. Let's try to go on the side a little bit, not hit it straight on. It's too big. Oh, bounced there. Yeah, I'm really cognizant of not wanting to destroy the engine because I don't have a skid plate. And oh yeah, that's so vulnerable down there, and it's really low on this bike. Yeah, see, that's a pretty good, like from here up to here, that's a good maybe 8 or 10 inches on this middle part. Over here it's more like 4 or 5 inches, so that's the route we have to take on that bike. Some of the other bikes we can go up this part.
NX500 freeway test. Let's go. Okay, we're at our 80 miles per hour target speed. We're at 6,500 RPM in top gear. I feel a little bit of vibration through the handlebars, just a little bit of tingling vibration. A tiny bit through the foot pegs, but not too bad. Stability feels great, actually. Wind protection is very good. And this is a comfortable place to be. Really, really good for this category on the freeway. The engine is a little busy, but it's got plenty more that it could go. And yeah, it feels great. It feels really good. Doesn't feel stressed at all. NX500 Sport Riding Test. As the only bike in the group with a 19-inch front wheel, this bike should have an advantage in handling on the highway, and it does. That smaller front wheel feels more agile, it turns in faster, keeps the weight of the bike at a center of gravity lower, makes for a better road motorcycle. That's why you see a lot of the adventure bikes with 19-inch front wheels. They work better on the road. The handling of this bike is really exceptional. It's lightweight, it's playful, it's agile. And while it's not a sport bike and you're not going to keep up on a racetrack with anything, in the real world, it does just fine. It's also going to depend on what tires you choose to put on it. But this bike is fun to ride. It's got good power from the engine. The shifter works really well. Quick shifter would be nice to have, but when you learn to shift without the clutch, you can just do that. Brakes work well enough coming into corners. It's a lot of fun, and it's got enough power to move along at a good pace and be pretty entertaining. It's just not going to knock your socks off, but that's the same case with all the bikes in this category. Really, really enjoyable road bike. What a great little package for riding on the road. Really, really nice.
Testing notes on the NX500 after concluding the test. Seat was pretty comfortable, although it slopes a little bit forward. For the comfort aspect, I noticed my leg room, my legs were really folded up and cramped, and I wasn't comfortable because of the bend in my legs. The pegs are really high in relation to the seat. You don't have much leg room. On the highway and kind of twisty road riding and cruising down the highway, this bike is very nice in terms of the engine and the wind protection and the overall smoothness of it. Off-road, the bike really felt out of its element. The suspension was bouncing around, pretty much out of control. It was bottoming the front and the back very frequently off-road. Ground clearance is limited, and the ergonomics really didn't feel right for off-road, especially when you try to stand up. But as a road bike, I really enjoyed it. My measured fuel economy was 67 miles per gallon. How do these motorcycles compare? How are they different? How are they similar? Which one is best for you? How do you even go about making this decision? First of all, I want to encourage you to check down below in the pinned comment and the description of the video. You'll be able to download this document that I'm holding right here. I've made a PDF. It encapsulates all my test results, the specifications of the bike that you care about, my ratings in terms out of 5 stars for all these categories I've identified, their total score, and then the important features that the bikes do or do not have that you can compare between them. So this is the critical document right here. It's a free PDF download. There's obviously no strings attached, and it's not a virus, so don't worry. Now, a lot of people in these kind of comparisons want to pick a best bike or a winner of the test, and people want me to select that. I have a real problem with that, because that's really not a very intelligent way to look at a comparison like this. All of these 6 motorcycles bring their unique pros and cons to the table. So depending on how you're going to use the motorcycle, you would select a different bike based on your personal use case and your personal preferences. And my point with doing a big comparison group test like this is to show you and to give you all the information possible so you can make the best decision for yourself. So I hope that makes sense. At the beginning of the video, I promised I was going to talk about sort of livability, practicality, maintenance, ownership, and everything like that. So let's look at that a little bit between these motorcycles. Now you can see that information here, but let's start by looking at the warranties. If you're buying a brand new motorcycle, you care about that. So Royal Enfield, and this is for the USA, Royal Enfield has the best warranty. It's 3 years, unlimited miles, followed by CFMOTO, and then all the other bikes only have a 1-year warranty. Now, KTM does advertise a 4-year, what they call premium warranty, but there's a catch with that, and it's a little bit cheeky what they did. They're saying that to get a 4-year warranty on a KTM, you have to service it at the dealership every single year, which, if you know dealership service rates, is going to cost you a lot of money. So if you want to do your own service, you're not going to get that 4-year warranty. So because of that, I really say it's really just still a 1-year warranty unless you want to follow those requirements and try to get your 4-year warranty out of it. Also on this document are service intervals from major service intervals. Now you've got minor services, oil changes, and of course you're going to be, adjusting your chain and basic maintenance like that. But the expensive part of owning a motorcycle, as opposed to a car, I think, that you don't have on a car, is that you've got to do valve clearance adjustments on most bikes. They have to tear into the bike pretty deeply, and it gets expensive with the labor rates that shops charge. So the CFMOTO leads in this regard. It's got a 24,000 mile, 38,000 kilometer major service interval. Compare that to the Himalayan 450, which has a 6,000, 10,000 interval, 6,000 mile, 10,000 kilometer. Now, after I think 2 or 3 valve checks, they then double that, so it does kind of go up over time. But keep that in mind, and then you can look at what you have for the other bikes. So that's something you really have to consider. Another big maintenance factor is cleaning your air filter. If you're gonna off-road your bike, this is more of an issue. If you're gonna use it 95% on the highway, this probably doesn't really matter. But if you're off-roading a lot, then where that air filter is gonna matter, because it's gonna get dusty and clogged up really fast if you ride off-road, especially if you ride with your friends. So for instance, like the Ibex, the KLR, the KTM 390, and the NX500, those 4 bikes have air filters that are easily accessible either under the side panel or under the seat. The Himalayan and the KLE actually have air filters that are underneath the fuel tank. So it's quite a bit more involved to get to the air filters on those 2 bikes than it is those other 4. Something to consider. 2 other features that I know matter to a lot of you because I read your comments that come through every day on the videos on the channel are tubeless wheels to make puncture repair much easier than tubes on the wheels, and then cruise control. So some of the bikes here have tubeless wheels or available with tubeless, and the other ones are not. That is a huge factor for many of you. I've heard you, and I kind of agree with you actually. For adventure touring where you're traveling, having tubeless wheels is really what you want to have. I know off-road riders, dirt bikers are going to use tubes on their bikes, but these really aren't dirt bikes or enduro bikes. These are really traveling bikes, and they really probably all should have tubeless rims if we're being honest. Cruise control or electronic cruise control is another nice thing to have. Now you can put a throttle lock like an Atlas throttle lock or a Calco throttle lock, the one you twist, on a lot of these bikes, and that will give you some ability to rest your hand, but electronic cruise control is on another level. There's only one bike here, the 390 from KTM, that offers cruise control from the dealership or from the factory. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, also, some of the motorcycles here, you can get aftermarket cruise control from Viridian Cruise. I know you can get it for the Himalayan, and you can get it for the NX500. The bikes that have, on the KLE500, it's so new, I don't know if they're going to be able to develop it for the KLE500 because it looks like it's a cable, but I can tell you for sure the KLR is a cable throttle. You're not getting electronic cruise control on that. Also, the Ibex 450, sadly, is a cable throttle, so you're not going to get cruise control on that. Other features that you may care about, and I don't want to read through all these, you can look at this on your own, but it just depends on what kind of things you care about. For instance, if you put your phone on your handlebar, you want to be able to charge your phone while you're navigating or doing whatever. So some of the bikes have USB ports, that's a nice thing to have, and a few of them don't have that. Adjustable windshields, really, really nice. Adjustable seat heights, really, really nice, and I think the only bike that has that is the Himalayan. Center stands. So you have to look at what do I need out of my motorcycle, and either does this bike come with it from the factory, or is it an aftermarket accessory that I could potentially put on later, or an OEM accessory as well. So look up and research those things before you make your buying decision, depending on what's important to you. My test results, you can see that here. So I measured the 0 to 70 or 0 to 112 kilometer back to 0 time, the test acceleration and braking. You can see my results here. So if you want the fastest bike, that's the KLE500, and that makes sense because it has the most power. The next fastest bike was the 390R. It makes sense because if you just look at the power to weight ratios, you're going to kind of see the results are kind of what you expect there. I also measured the RPM cruising on the highway at 80 miles per hour or 130 kilometers an hour. So some of the bikes are lower, some are higher, and like the Royal Enfield and the NX500 have a little more relaxed feel. Some of the other bikes feel a little bit more revved out, like the CFMOTO does. I measured the fuel economy, and that also ties into the riding range. So better fuel economy lets you ride longer on a tank, but also the tank sizes are different. So the bike here with the longest fuel range is actually the NX500. It's not the bike with the biggest tank. The bike with the biggest tank is the KLR, but because it gets poor fuel economy, it doesn't have the longest riding range. Now, you may test these bikes in your conditions and measure different fuel economy, but I do think that the relative differences from my test should be probably what you would find as well. Now I get to the hardest part of this for me anyway. The hardest part for me is giving them these ratings out of 5 stars. So I took 6 categories: on-road performance, comfort, wind protection, off-road capability, suspension, and brakes. And for those 6 areas, I gave them a score out of 5 possible stars. And I didn't do like half stars or something. I wanted to be decisive and say, look, it's like 2, 3, 4, 5 stars, or in some cases even 1 star. Well, I think I only gave that out 1 time. And I really do mean these ratings. I put a lot of thought into them. Now, here's the thing though. You might, if you tested these 6 bikes, you may have slightly different feelings about some of these ratings and how they relate to each other. And that's the nature of testing products. Although I do my best, your ratings might be a little bit different. The other thing is, I hesitated to do this, but when you've got 6 categories with 5 points in each category, it does give you a total potential score of 30. That is not to say that the bike with the highest total number of points, which in this case is the CFMOTO, it's not to say that's the best bike in the test or the winner of the test. However, it's just how the categories added up. But depending on what you prioritize, your winner in quotes might be a different bike than the highest score here on the list. And you may, in fact, prefer a KLR 650 that got the lowest score in the test. Let me give you my top 3 choices for off-road performers, and it's probably obvious if you watched the rest of the video. Number 1 is the KTM 390 Adventure R, by far and away the best off-road performer. Despite having a pretty lackluster rear shock that bottoms out a lot, it still is so light and nimble and capable off-road, and with the ground clearance you can just go anywhere. Next up for me is the Himalayan. The Himalayan I think is the second best off-road in this group. And then third, really close on the heels of the Himalayan, I think is the Ibex 450. Now, if you're a highway person, if you want the best on-road performance, what are my top 3 picks there? So number 1 is the KLE 500. I really felt that was giving me the best overall highway performance out of this group. Next up was the NX500. Now that surprised me. I expected the NX to be first because it's got a 19-inch front wheel. It's a bit more road biased of a design, but I found the KLE to be a little bit better. Then in third place, I had the Ibex for on-road performance. Now, you're going to want to know this, and I'll share it, although I probably shouldn't. Did I have a personal favorite bike in this test? I did. Now, this is not to say it's the winner or the best bike by any means, but yes, I did have a personal favorite, and it was the CFMOTO Ibex 450. To explain why, I think it's really reflected in the scores that I gave it and the overall score that it earned. Not only does it have almost all the good features that I'd be looking for in an adventure motorcycle: a smooth engine, adjustable windshield, tubeless wheels, and a whole lot more going for it. It's got good adjustable suspension in addition to a lot of other things. And I personally felt that if there was one bike in this group that I had to buy and ride for the next couple years in every condition from on-road to off-road, hands down, it would be the Ibex 450. Now, again, please download this, use this at your leisure, at your convenience. Take it for what you will. I hope it's useful, but just be sure to download that so you can see all this information for yourself. Final thoughts in this 6-way comparison test. This has been quite the project to put together. I truly hope it's been useful and informative. It was a heck of a lot of fun filming it. I'm really glad I could put this together. All 6 bikes in this test, I believe, represent some of the best motorcycles you can buy today for the money, even if you're not going to really take the bike off-road. This small adventure motorcycle category is growing in popularity for excellent reasons. These bikes are comfortable, practical, versatile, and they don't cost too much money. If there's things I missed in the comparison, little details you want me to fill in, or questions you have for me, please put that down below, and I do my absolute best to get back to you as soon as I can. If you like the sort of work I'm doing here at Big Rock Moto, and I hope you do, please consider supporting the channel, and there are a bunch of ways to do that down below. Thank you so much for watching. Ride safe, and I'll see you out there.